I think when she came down, I was already in the police car with the handcuffs and my hands behind my back. Yeah, so that was, I remember, the second time that I got into a lockup lah. For most part of my life, I didn't know Christ. Growing up, I guess I tried to do a lot of things my way lah. In my secondary school days, I was such an angry kid. I remember like punching the wall, punching the cupboard. I would, there's a lot of anger in me and I didn't know how to express it out lah. And I would just have these arguments, especially with my dad. I remember my mom also was so afraid, that the arguments at home would escalate into downright fighting, punching each other. And then I remember my mom even saying things like, she might even call the police and stuff like that. Back then, how I actually dealt with it was a lot of drinking. So I've been drinking for as long as I could remember. I had a lot of suppressed frustrations that I didn't know how to talk about. I remember there were even times where I would go and drink with my dad, and because of all the anger and frustration that I had towards my dad, right, it would all come out in a drunken, like, anger, rage. There was even one instance at home. I was, after we went out for a drinking session, I got home and then I totally became a different person. I was so angry, I went to the kitchen, I took a knife. Basically, I got a tattoo on my back that says, "Friendships fade, family lasts forever." And then I think my father said something to me, like he challenged me. He said something like, if family is so important to you, then like why are you like this? Why are you acting like this? And then I got so I don't know if it was frustration, anger, guilt, or shame, right? I remember I took the knife. It wasn't that I wanted to attack, that I wanted to take the knife to kind of like just scrape that tattoo off my back. But yeah, but thank God, at that point of time, I don't know what came over me. I didn't do anything stupid. I didn't do anything rash with the knife. Growing up, I've always been this very angry kid that became an angry adult. Drinking was always the solution for me to suppress my emotions. I was lost basically. I just didn't know what else to do in life. I would end up drunk, going to work drunk. I would get into fights in the clubs, in the pubs. Honestly, I remember even going to like Alcohol Anonymous because this was something that was it was really getting out of hand basically, and it wasn't just destroying my life at that point of time, but it was also really, I was hurting the people around me I remember I would get pissed drunk and then going home, and then I would be so abusive to my mom. I think that my memory of my dad it's a very bittersweet memory I felt like he did his best to try to love and provide for us, but at the same time, I always felt like there was this disconnection from my dad. Like I was never good enough for him. I wish I could hear my dad say to me like, "I am proud of you, son," but I never really heard him say it in my whole lifetime And my memory of my dad is always a very angry father. I remember growing up, he would be on the phone scolding colleagues, firing people over the phone. My mom would tell me like, "Oh, today your father is not in a good mood. You better be quiet. Don't make your dad angry." And then I would just be like quietly at one corner observing him walking up and down the house on the phone and like shouting vulgarities and just firing people. But I don't blame him. I still think that he did his best to try to provide. But it was a very confusing relationship with my dad because I think as I got older, one memory that actually ingrained in me that I wrestle and I struggle so much with was there was a time when my dad brought me to a pub to drink, and I remember I was quite young back then. Now I think about it, felt quite confused. I felt quite unsafe. And then I remember him shoving $50 into my hand and asking me to give to the girl. And I just remember it being a very weird situation, a weird feeling being there. Like like that, you're married to my mom, you know, like you're my mom, my dad is here. And like, why is my dad bringing me to a place like this and doing things like that? So it was a very, very weird relationship with my dad. Yeah. There's always this memory when I was really young, I think like probably kindergarten. My mom was like crazy, pissed, angry at my dad. She was like raging, crying, angry, and I remember I was so scared. She took the family portrait down, like the photo of us, right? And then she was just like crying so hard, and with a hammer, she was smashing the family photo in the sink. My brother back then, probably maybe primary 6 or maybe sec 1. I remember him bringing me to my room, and he locked the door, and then he was just like hugging me and telling me that everything would be fine lah. I mean, truth be told, to this day, I still don't know what exactly happened. I can only I can only guess. I mean, no offense to these people, right? But I thought my life would just be a ape sitting at the coffee shop drinking beer and trying to flirt with the lady who sells the beer and like complain about wives, you know. Nothing wrong with those people, but you know, I always just thought that was going to be my life lah. I remember my dad just had cancer, was diagnosed with cancer, and I was moving into a new industry at work, and that's when the drinking also started to become more excessive. And then subsequently, my mom had a stroke, and it was a very tough time also because that was when I was also, as a financial advisor, trying to build my business, but at the same time, take care of my mom. And I guess, you know, during that period with so much things going on and losing all my savings in business, the only thing I knew how to do was drink. And you know it's bad, right? When you know you don't even have money and then you're still going to drink to run away from your problems. So that was me at that point of time. While my dad was going through his cancer, I remember it was a very tough 3 months lah. So from the time he was diagnosed to the time he left us was about 3 months. My mom and I, we were on like shift duties lah, because my dad was already at a point where he was in so much pain and he was just constantly vomiting even when he didn't eat anything. I remember when I woke up at 3 o'clock, my dad was awake. And back then, I wasn't a Christian, but I remember looking at my dad and just, it's crazy, you know, like when they say that, you know, we got a soul, we got spirit, right? When I was looking at my dad, I remember at that point of time, this person is not my dad anymore. Like the spirit and the soul already left him. Like I could see in his eyes, right? This is just a shell of my dad. It was around 4 plus a.m. I remember one of the times when he woke up to vomit again, and then I would hold the pail for him and then wipe his mouth. And for a split second, you know, my dad looked at me and then he said to me, "Wah, teruk." Like basically like, "Wah, jialat ah." Like, and those were the last words that my dad ever said to me. I remember at that point of time, I didn't mention it to anyone, but it just stuck with me, you know. It was like my dad telling me, like, "Wow, I led my life wrong." Like, why would my dad say that? Why would he say, like, you know, he did it wrong? I think when I met Jane and when Jane met me, it was at a point of time where my drinking was probably at the worst state of my life. I always say that I experienced God's perfect love through Jane lah, because like to this day I don't know what Jane saw in me at that point of time. Even till now, I still do not know what she sees in me. But if it wasn't for, you know, for her and experiencing God's perfect love through her, I would be either dead, homeless, or in jail lah. So when I met Jane, and you know, it just, there was this conviction in my heart, like, hey, I want to marry this girl. I actually like a bit kalang kabut lah. I was like, wow, I need to figure out how to be a good husband. Like, I need to know how to do this. Like, I'm I'm going to make my wife suffer for the rest of her life that she chooses to be with me, you know, and I didn't want that lah. Like, my mom didn't really have a very happy marriage, I would say. You know, she went through so much suppression, so much oppression, you know, so much verbal abuse, and I didn't want that for Jane lah. So I guess my whole faith journey started with one very simple question, you know, is how to be a husband. When you ask your future father-in-law his daughter's hand in marriage, you know, essentially what you're asking, are you okay to give me that responsibility of taking care of your daughter, you know, like you've been taking care of her your whole life. So the first time I went over to their place for like dinner, and the atmosphere in their home was just so different lah. Like, how come this uncle, this auntie, and then their kids, you know, they can all sit down at a table, talk, and like really connect, and there's just this love in the atmosphere. And the only thing that I knew was that, oh, this uncle is a Christian. Or like, hey, what was this thing that, you know, these Christian people know that I didn't know growing up, or my dad didn't know. So I think back then what was happening was I was working really hard, trying so hard to earn enough to support, not even support us lah, like just support myself. I was really working from a place of so much pain and hurt and frustration. So every day I would go out and like strive so hard, you know, I'll be like pushing so hard. And then I would come back home just absolutely depleted, like totally empty. And then I would just drink to try to fill up whatever void was inside, get pissed drunk. And Jane witnessed it lah. She saw me like just crying on her kitchen floor, like totally dead crying, and then picking myself up the next day and just feeling so depressed, but having to shake it off and just move forward and then repeat the same thing again. She tells me that she saw I had a good heart, which I think is like the weirdest thing lah. I don't know what did God do to her eyes lah, that she saw this good heart at that point of time. March 2021. So what happened was there was a work event where we all went for drinks, and then after the event ended, Jane left to do her stuff, went on to do her appointments and stuff. I just continued drinking lah, so without her knowing. That was when I got into this fight with someone. I don't even remember what happened again. But all I remember was after that I was by the roadside, like just raging, crying, and like making a nuisance. Somebody called the police, and I guess the police called Jane lah. And then I think she was very surprised. Like, I think when she came down, I was already in the police car with the handcuffs and my hands behind my back. I remember when the alcohol started to wear off, there was a huge wave of guilt that just came upon me. The first time I was locked up, I remember I didn't have that guilt. I was still like very prideful and like, yeah, you know, lock me up, right? Like, so what? But this second time something hit me lah. I just felt so ashamed, and at that point of time I remember I wanted to propose to Jane already. And I was thinking to myself, how am I going to ask my father-in-law, you know, like, uncle, you know, I would like to have your daughter's hand in marriage. By the way, I might go to jail, you know. So I remember Jane came with her friend. She bailed me out. I think that was probably the most sad and depressed and shame she's ever seen me. She still comforted me at that point of time, but after that she did very clearly hint to me that, you know, I kind of got to get my shit together, right? Like, you know, I'm not going to marry a guy who is going to continue on like this. So it was around that time that I think I was already sort of coming to church during that period, right? I think it was at cell group that they will like ask about your life and stuff, and they found out like Jane is dating. So they said, hey, why not invite your boyfriend lah? One of the most amazing things that I experienced back then was, I remember when I walked into my then cell group leader's home, you know, like these guys are like total strangers, right? Like I don't even know who they are, right? And then they were so nice, so friendly. And you can sense when people are fake and you can sense when they're genuine, right? So like they were so genuinely just open to me and opening up their homes, hosting me, putting food on the table for me to eat. Like I'm a total stranger, to them. And I remember just going into the house and then like, why is everyone so friendly? And why do I don't sense like these people have an ulterior motive? I remember, the Connect members just praising and worshipping, and I was just sitting down there. And honestly, I remember thinking to myself, just looking around and like trying to sense the room, like, okay, does this feel like a cult? No, it doesn't feel like a cult. Okay, actually, these people are like really genuine. Yeah, after praise and worship, then I remember like at the end of the service, I guess it was probably church lah, and then like church at home, then there was the sinner's prayer. So the pastor said the sinner's prayer, and then before he says that, he would say like, repeat after me lah. So I was from the military background, so I don't question, right? Like I always joke lah, officer say jump, my question is jump how high. He asked me to run, I say run how far lah. So when the pastor on the TV just said like, hey, repeat after me, then I said, okay, I'll repeat after you lah. He said the sinner's prayer, I repeated the sinner's prayer, and then amen, and then we all went to have lunch. And then I remember the host or the cell group leader, he asked me this question, because knowing that like I'm new, like totally new to the faith, right? And he was like, hey, actually, do you know what you said? Then I said, oh, I don't actually. And then he said to me, oh, that's actually the sinner's prayer. What it means is, would you like to accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior? And, not really knowing anything about like who is Jesus Christ at that point of time. I just knew like these people here in the house, genuinely are nice people. Despite me sharing with them the things that I was going through, like the ongoing court case and everything, they never once condemned me or like, oh, you got court case, you're a criminal, nothing like that. In fact, all lay hands on me and pray. Then I'm like, wow, what's going on? Wow, thank you. So I remember when he asked me, would you like to accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior? Then I was thinking, if these people over here, they've accepted Jesus Christ as the Lord and Savior, they're nice, they're happy, they're living such a life with hope, right? I was like, yeah, sure, I would love to lah. And then then the cell group leader just said like, repeat after me. Then I repeated, and then amen. And then like, okay guys, let's eat lunch. And then I was really happy lah. Was also when I had the court case against me. The context was that this was my second drinking incident that had happened. The first one was drink driving lah. I remember the judge telling me lah, like, one more time you have a drinking incident, you're going in already. So during that period when I had my second drinking incident, that was when I was thinking to myself like, oh my goodness, I'm going in already. Like, that's it, that's the end of my career. What's going to happen with proposing to Jane? I remember attending the conference, and there was one pastor, and if I'm not wrong, I think it's Pastor Jason Lozano. So he was sharing during the conference about his background, about his story, and I just remember like this pastor was basically a paikia gangster before he became a pastor, right? And then he's like, like, I don't know, in the US, like in the ghetto, like you're talking about like really killing people and like, selling drugs and whatnot. And I was just so intrigued by his story, because I mean I really resonated with his background growing up. And then I remember that we had this thing called miracle offering. Miracle offering is also a time, not, we don't just sow into it, but we also pray for miracles in our lives as well lah. So we were also praying over my case lah. So I asked Jane, I remember, like, hey, I want to give to miracle offering. And she said that she prayed and she has a number in mind, and she told me the figure. She said, hey, if you want, you can also sow in that same amount lah. And then I said like, oh, I want to hear God tell me the amount. I don't want to just put that amount because that's what she said, right? And I'll never forget, the very, very first thing I ever heard God say to me was, listen to Jane lah. I remember Jane telling me also, hey, while you're sowing to it, sometimes, God just wants you to ask Him to remove this court case against me. So I already reached a point where in my mind, I'm thinking, the judge already told me, one more time you're going in, and this is that one more time. What do I gotta lose, man? I'm just gonna sow, and then I'm just gonna ask God, just remove this case law. After sowing 2 weeks later, when I was on this Zoom with my client, my investigating officer called me. So I still remembered, I was like, hey bro, this one big client called me, I got to pick up the phone. I answered the call, and I still remember I said, good afternoon, sir. And then the IO said, like, is this Tang Sing Wei, Raphael, and then NRIC number? And then my answer was, yes, sir. He said, okay, investigation concluded, all charges dropped. And then I just like, huh? Seriously, all charges dropped. And then I asked him like, sir, all charges dropped means there's no criminal record, nothing, is it? Then he said, yeah, no criminal record, nothing. Wow, and I remember at that very moment, right, I don't know how to explain, there was a kind of liberation, like it's just suddenly there was this heavy load off my shoulders. I felt like, wow, suddenly my life just got picked out from this dead end and just put on a different track altogether. And I couldn't believe it. It was like, wow, really, a prayer, like, God, just remove this. And 2 weeks later, He removed it. So that was like probably the first miracle I ever witnessed in my life. How He really changed the trajectory of my life. The journey hasn't been easy, but it is so life-giving, so fruitful, truth be told. I mean, like, if you ask me, would I choose anything else other than this life that God has given me, right? My answer is 1,000% no. Like, I tried to do my life my way, like doing it for the past 29 years of my life, and where it got me was just almost in jail, basically. So I'm just grateful and humbled. I've tried to quit drinking and quit smoking so many times in my life, but I think what was the root problem back then that I was facing was, I think it goes back to my childhood. God very gently surfaced up a lot of my daddy issues. And so I always say, back then, I only knew 3 emotions, basically. Angry, sad, and happy. That was me when I was drinking. And then Jane would say, like when you're not drinking, you're fine, you're a great guy. But then once you start to drink, like, wow, I totally change into a different person. And interestingly, she's not the first person to say that. My mom would say that as well. So I think after that ultimatum incident that happened, I remember praying to God and like asking God, like, how can I move forward, and ask Jane to be my wife, if there's this thing in me, right? Like, and really every single day I remember going into my spare room back there, and every day I would cry. I would just cry to God, because I didn't know what else to do. I would just pray and I would just cry out to Him, like, Lord, I do not want this to continue in my heart, if it's just me and I self-destruct, sure. But I don't want this for Jane. I don't want this to destroy a marriage that hasn't even begun. And I remember just wanting so much for it to, wanting this desire to drink to just go away. And the craziest thing, I mean, God works in mysterious ways, right? Like, I can't even remember how He did it, but He did it so gently. For the first time in my life, when I opened that 0 alcohol and I drank it, right, I realized I don't even like the taste of beer. And even to this day, by the grace of God, it's another miracle in my life, right, that I don't have that desire. God really worked through me, through Jane, to me, to deal with all the suppressed emotions that I was going through back then. I don't need to drink to be able to express those emotions. I can talk to God, I can talk to Jane, I can talk to my friends. like I've still got baggage with my dad, and God is slowly revealing to me. So Greenhouse is a discipleship program in my church, and last year I was taking healthy relationships lah. So wanting to strengthen my relationship with my wife. Married for 3 years now. 3 years, right? Oh, yeah, 3 years. And then in the very first semester, I heard God say to me, I'm going to strengthen your relationship with your dad. And then I was just thinking to myself, what is this? I mean, my dad is gone already lah. He's passed away already. Then I'm like, how are you going to strengthen my relationship with my dad? Or I'm going to work, right, like this relationship with me? My father, like, am I supposed to go to the cemetery or something and like going to talk to my dad there or something? And that was the first thing I heard in the first semester, and then it was just silent all the way. So during the third semester, I remember it was during one of the encounter sessions in Greenhouse. And it was so crazy because there was such a clear image in my head. So this was like a third party's point of view. I'm looking at basically me, my dad, and Jesus. We were in that room sitting with like the foldable chairs. And I remember I couldn't hear anything. There wasn't any audio, but through the body language, I could see that, God was doing something in us. It was literally like Jesus was a counselor there, and he was talking to my dad and talking to me, and he was mending that relationship between me and my dad as father and son. And I was just looking at it and thinking to myself, my goodness, this is crazy. And then that scene just flashed into my dad, like just ugly shouting and crying, like it's one thing for God to work in me and through me, and to reveal my anger and my frustrations. But when I saw my dad like just manifesting all that, his frustrations, his anger, his hurt, because he didn't have a very good childhood growing up as well. Right? And I was just watching it, like he was screaming out, like Jesus was doing some deliverance on him, in that period. And then it flashed to another scene, and I remember asking my dad, why do you, why are you so hard on me? I just figured like I would never hear my dad ever say like, you are good enough lah. Like, I mean, he's gone already, right? So in that scene, I remember asking my dad, why are you so hard on me, And then he ugly cried and shouted at me, but it wasn't like shouting at me. It was more of like shouting out his frustration. And he said to me, because I want you to be better than me. I want you to do better than me. And then he said, I'm proud of you. I'm proud of who you are and what you're doing right now. I don't know, it's crazy. I just felt something really lift off my heart. Like, that's our God, right? Like, he makes the impossible possible, Like, I never thought I would ever hear my dad say that to me, Especially right now when he's not even around in this world. I needed to hear that from my dad for the healing for me to happen, and for me to be a even more godly husband, a more godly man. This is God revealing to me and working through me. And I believe that there's more unpacking so that will come in this process. So this house that we're actually sitting in right now is also like a miracle house, man. This was during the lockdown period, right? So every single contractor that we tried to engage, all of them said like they don't have enough manpower because like a lot of them are stuck in Malaysia. They can't get the manpower in. I remember we were praying and then we asked God, God, we know that, this is a place that you have blessed us with, and like, Father, Lord, if you just bless us with an ID who can do everything up in the timeline that we want to, that we will host Cell Group Connects and everything also. We'll make this your house of miracles lah. Basically, that's what we said to God. And it was crazy. I remember we just literally searched online on like a Facebook group. We randomly go and just PM this dude. And interestingly enough, this guy was a Christian as well. I remember everything that we asked him, right? Like, hey, we are really tight on the deadline. We want to move in as soon as possible. He checked his timeline. Yeah, can, everything can. It was crazy. And not only was it within our timeline, right? It was actually earlier than that. So I remember the very first cell group that we hosted back then, right? It was like literally construction site outside here right now, right? And then, us and our cell group members, inside our master bedroom, we don't even have a bed, just unfold one tilam, put there. I still remember telling my connect members like, hey, can you bring the IKEA screwdriver? Because we just got the table from IKEA, but we need the screwdriver to screw. It was crazy. Like, God really blessed us with this home, this place. From a small connects that we had in our master bedroom, just the three of us, with the construction site outside over here. Toilet can't even use. To now, hosting connects, having really seen miracles happen in our connect members. I'm just so humbled by what God has done in and through both me and Jane in our marriage, basically. I think our God is such a loving God. Like, there's nothing that we can do that disqualifies us from His love. I struggle a lot with guilt and shame about my past. And I know a lot of my friends who struggle with all this guilt and shame as well. But our God is such a loving God, like if He can do this with me, He can definitely do it with you. Yeah, there's really nothing so terrible that you can do that God would say that you're not my son, you're not my daughter. And He's just waiting for you to run to Him. His arms are open and it's crazy.